So first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. Just by way of introduction, so people can recall why we're here. At our last board meeting, as a result of the timing and the scope of development for the Waterfront and East Bayfront and Villiers, we felt it would be important to look now and have a free discussion with members of the board about some ideas that we could work on with respect to development of these important lands. And so we have George Dark, who will work with us in our closed session to look at how we can ensure a promising future for the waterfront. But like all the time, whenever the board gets together, it must be by way of a formal board meeting. And so now I'm going to start that formal board meeting. And the first thing that we need to do is approval of the meeting agenda. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting?
It's Devon. I'm happy to move.
Thank you.
Happy to second. It's Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. All in favor? Approved. Are there any conflicts of interest? Okay, so the next item of business is the approval of the minutes of the open session of June 25th, 2020. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes and a seconder, please?
Happy to move.
Hi,
Okay.
Sevon. Happy to second.
Okay, great. Okay, so that has now been approved. Again, thanks everyone for attending today's meeting. I'd also like to thank our government partners for their participation today and for their ongoing support of Waterfront Toronto. Our meeting today is being conducted via an electronic conference facilities to help contain the spread of COVID-19. We continue to make progress in our collective fight against COVID-19, and although some people have been able to join the meeting in person while respecting social distancing guidelines, we will continue to meet virtually until we are sure it is safe for all concerned. Just before we move on to the next item, and it will be hopefully an exciting and informative meeting this morning, I do want to let people know that it is very much with mixed emotions, and I want to let people know that Savon has let us know that she will be leaving the board at the end of this month, and this will be her last board meeting. Sev's term was to end in November, as her term had been extended by the federal government last year, but she's moving on, as people are aware, with a very exciting job at Rogers, and she has been a tremendously engaged and helpful director since 2016, and importantly, chair of the Human Resources Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee since March of 2019. Sev, I know that I speak for the entire board when I sincerely say I want to thank you so much for all of your contributions over these past years. We will miss your insights, your guidance, and your sunny humor when it's most needed. Our loss is Rogers' gain, and I hope in the near future we'll have an opportunity to express our thanks to you in person. So thanks again, Steph.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a true privilege, and I've loved the opportunity to serve not only in this modest contribution to public service, but alongside such wonderful directors and under the leadership of you, Steve, as our chair, and George, having you come in as our CEO has just been a tremendous gift to this organization. So it's my privilege and my pleasure to have been part of it, and I'll always remain a fan. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So just moving on to clean up some other matters before we get into some of the business. Following on our comments from the June board meeting regarding diversity, I'm pleased to announce that all Waterfront staff, our design review panel, and our board are going to be participating in the Indigenous Cultural Safety Training Program provided by the Provincial Health Services Authority. This program is a unique online training program designed to enhance self-awareness and strengthen the skills of those who work both directly and indirectly with Indigenous people. The goal of the Sanya's Indigenous Cultural Safety Training is to develop an understanding and to promote positive partnerships between service providers and Indigenous people. At Waterfront Toronto, we value our relationships with Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to strengthening our relationships with them in years to come. I've actually started the program, and it really is quite fascinating and interesting and helpful. So having moved on and talking about that, and I hope everybody else finds it to be helpful, that even with COVID-19, I have been and continue to be extremely impressed with the work of the corporation, who have continued, despite the COVID and the challenges of working virtually with respect to management and staff, with respect to our business. So I thank you. And at this point, I thought it might be appropriate for George and some of his team to just give us an overview on recent activities and developments that may be relevant to our discussions this morning. And so, George, I now turn it over to you for our CEO update. George, we can't hear you.
All right, Steve, we're having problems here. I'm hoping you guys can hear us.
I'm hoping you guys can hear us.
All right. We have a delay.
There's a lot of feedback.
Okay, yeah. You want to turn that off? I'm going to just try to go. Okay, Steve, I'm going to try this. I apologize. We're having huge technical difficulties here, despite being. Okay. First of all, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's both healthy and safe this morning, and I'll just share a few updates, and I hope you can hear these. As many of you know, that we had a groundbreaking ceremony for our T3 Bayside project with Hines and Tridel. We had Ministers McKenna and Minister Laurie Scott, along with Mayor John Tory and myself. We were targeted to give a brief speech. Both ministers did have the opportunity to speak, but unfortunately, Mayor Tory was interrupted by the protesters and the event was halted. However, we did have a good conversation with the ministers and with the mayor. For those who don't know, the Hines building, they're building out from timber construction, not tall timber, but a timber construction. It is basically going to be a future commercial space for the Bayside community. It could host as many as 3,000 employees. It's next to the Aquilina building, which is only the second residential building that was certified LEED Platinum and the first in Toronto. And it's next to the Aiken Place Park, which is a park that we completed in the fall. Despite the protest, we did take the Minister McKenna on a tour of the Portland's flood protection project. She was very impressed with the work that was done and had asked whether we had reached out and could we share some of that experience with other agencies, in particular the National Capital Commission in Ottawa. We did point out that we do reach out to them and we've had meetings with them. She also suggested that we look to show the public the great work that's being done through a drone. And we identified that actually, and we'll present to you today, that we had that planned. We also met with Adam Vaughan, the local MP, where we shared some of the ideas that I'll be sharing with you today about how we could activate the waterfront. He was very supportive of the ideas that we brought forward, and he's very impressed. He happened to be visiting the flood protection area the week before. And he had suggested that he wanted to set up a meeting with 3 of the key ministers to discuss the ideas that I shared with them. And also, obviously, he's a big proponent for the LRT, and he wanted to work with us to try to address the issue of timing for the LRT and hopefully get a positive announcement. I also had the opportunity, as many of you know, the Auditor General was a little critical of our process last time around in Ontario. And we thought we should meet with her and her senior staff to walk them through the process that we were going to undertake, both on the market sounding, but the entire process itself. She was very impressed with the process, very supportive of the process. So hopefully that would minimize any objections that we would face from that office going forward. On the issue of the Fairness Commissioner, we're undertaking right now the final stages of finalizing an agreement with the Fairness Commissioner. Unfortunately, Justice Coulter was involved in an accident, won't be available, and but we have an extremely if we get the person that we're currently speaking to, I think we'll be in a very, very good position. The Rakai Long-Term Center, many of you know, we've been working with Rakai and Waterfront Toronto has been looking at continuing to try to activate the waterfront with long-term care beds. There are 300 beds that are going to be located in West Don Lands. Waterfront Toronto believes that Rakai Center and West Don Lands can, achieve not only the community's vision of having complete community, address the public policy goals and the precinct plan goals, but Rakai has also done a great job of trying to incorporate the lessons learned from COVID-19. They had a recent meeting and the public was extremely supportive of the work that's being done there. We're going to be updating IREC at our next meeting on the work that's being done on that long-term care in that site. We identified to the board and got a board approval to release our integrated annual report. That was released on August 6th. We did forward the links to the electronic copies. If anybody wants a physical copy, we can make arrangements to distribute that to you. We had very, very positive remarks on the integrated report from the public and others. So I think we should be proud of the work that was done there. As the chair noted, we're well underway on the Indigenous cultural training. I did that training before. I'm actually doing the next round. I think you will find it very educational and it'll put us in a really good position in engaging with our Indigenous community. It also gives you a different perspective on diversity as a whole. So I think there are broader benefits than just the Indigenous community activity. But you'll have the opportunity. I know you're all going in different rounds. That's the way it's set up. If you have any questions, you can certainly contact either Rose or I. And then David Kosturin is going to walk us through some of the great work that's been done on the Portland's flood protection, including the Cherry Street lake filling and the surrounding area. Many of you know, David Ryder did a Toronto Star article this past weekend. I thought it was very well presented. We also had a report with the Weather Network. So they did a very good, smaller report, but very good as well. So I think it is important for us to continue to share with the public all of the other things that we're working on beside Quayside. David, I'm going to turn it over to you, and hopefully you've been able to hear some of what I've shared.
George, I could hear you 9 by 9 the entire time. It was fine. Good morning, everybody. So as Steve mentioned, we've actually been able to continue our work essentially uninterrupted since March, since the COVID shutdowns have happened. And in fact, the projects that I'm going to present, photos I'm going to present today reflect work that's been done all during this period. And we have had relatively minor impacts, I'd say very minor impacts from COVID that really have not put us off our schedules or our budgets on any project. So I know, can we go to page 10? On page 10, this is a video that has been done by Graham Construction, our contractor for the stormwater treatment facility at Cherry Street. As soon as it starts, moving along. There we go. So this was a flyby done a couple of weeks ago. That skylight is complete now. The building shell is complete. I will show you some photos of work that is happening on the inside of the building. This is an architecturally award-winning stormwater treatment facility. Fairly simple. It's simply a concrete structure, concrete shell, but with a very interesting form. And you can see this if you're driving on the Gardiner out at Cherry Street. So that's the exterior of the Cherry Street Stormwater Facility, and it will be complete end of this year is our target.
Kevin Sullivan
is now exiting.
Page 11, I know. Page 11, some interior shots. So on the left, you can see some of the process piping. So that we are taking all of the stormwater here from West Donlands, East Bayfront, and North Keating, collecting it in a very large underground storage tank, concrete storage tank. And then it is processed through this facility, there are two very large clarifiers, ballasted flocculation facility equipment that you see on the right. It's half concrete and half structure. So that work is underway, and as I say, is scheduled for completion at the end of this year. Page 12, we are also have just completed a pilot project for the public realm for Lakeshore Boulevard, and this is what Lakeshore is intended to look like once the Gardner rehab and Gardner hybrid work are completed. So that is on the south side of Lakeshore, between Bonnycastle and Sherburne Street, adjacent to the Moaned Building and Sherburne Common North. Page 13. Just completed Bonnycastle Public Realm on the west side, so again adjacent to Moaned Building. The east side work will be completed as part of the Quayside project in the future. So that's just been done. New trees, silvicels, and boulevard. Bayside Phase 2, just completing that work, and now you can see again Public Realm on Merchants Wharf. On the west side, sorry, on the east side of Bayside, new stops for Martin Goodman Trail has been slightly redone at that intersection as well. So that work is now complete. And then in Portland's flood protection project. So what we see here is the Rock Ripper update that shows cutoff walls are essentially complete across the entire site, and we are in the process of doing deep excavation in the Central River Valley. The purple area is showing the completed excavation, and we are continuing on towards the lake to the west. We've also started shallow excavation in the north-south section, which is the ice management area and the Don Greenway areas. So here's the photo. Here's a photo of the excavation as it was last week. We have reached the bottom of the excavation. You can see the scale of this, that there are 4 workers on the right-hand side of the frame here in the excavation. It's not terribly deep. At this point, it's probably only about 7 meters deep and a little deeper at the bottom of the river, and you can actually see the outcut where the river is going to be running. The river itself, when complete, will be about 30 meters wide, but the overall river valley, including the wetlands and the banks, is anywhere from 150 to 200 meters wide. This is just another video. We've done drone flybys pretty much quarterly. About just over a year ago, this is the status. We were just putting down the safety roads to complete the cutoff walls a year ago. And last month, you can see where we stood with respect to excavation. You can see the cutoff walls where they're installed. And those walls, by the way, go all the way into about 3 meters into the rock, which at certain points at the west end, for example, is about 50 meters deep. They're extraordinarily deep structures. And this is what that same view will look like some years into the future. I wish the trees were this big when we finished, but they won't be.
Mm-hmm.
Excavation, dewatering. So we have excavated about 400,000 cubic meters of the 1.4 million cubic meters that we are going to be excavating for the project. We are essentially achieving our targets with respect to reuse. There has been some material that's had to go off site because it's got non-aqueous phase liquids, meaning it's got mobile tars and gases and can't be treated, but the balance of the materials, and I'll talk about that momentarily, is being treated and reused. We're also pumping lake water out of the excavation to the tune of a couple of million liters a day, and that process is going very well. That material is, or that water is treated and then discharged back into the lake in accordance with provincial water quality guidelines. During the excavation, we're also doing archaeological monitoring full time. So here are two of our monitors. We're doing this in cooperation with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So they are working with TRCA, who are our archaeological monitors, on a daily basis to assess the materials that have been found. To date, it's mostly been bottles, some ceramics. Certainly, we haven't found any First Nations heritage or archaeological finds, and are not actually expecting to, because we're not digging that deep, but we are going to continue to be vigilant about monitoring this material. Just finalizing, these are a couple of photos of the finalization of the cutoff walls. So at the north and south ends of the eastern part of the river, at the ship channel, and at Villiers Island, where we connect into the Don River, we are putting in these secant pile walls, which will be part of the ultimate cutoff walls, or the plugs. We've got 3 plugs that keep the lake and the river out of our excavation until we're ready to remove those plugs and have the river and lake, or have the river start to flow. So those are just about done. I mentioned we're doing soil treatment reuse. We've got a number of different treatment types going on. A very large area where we're doing bioremediation. So we're creating windrows. You can see them on the left here, that are essentially just long rows of soil that we add surfactants and bacteria to, that helps to consume the hydrocarbons that are in the soil over the course of 8 to 12 weeks. They're turned on a weekly basis, and by the time that work is done, these piles are ready for reuse and meet the environmental requirements of the site. You can see on the right there is a berm that is showing where the River Park North will be. That's actually direct reuse material. We did not have to treat that. It's essentially the sands that came out of the inner harbor when portlands were filled 100 years ago. Next, page 21. Bridges and Cherry Street. So you can see on the left, the abutments for the Cherry Street North bridges over the Keating Channel are now complete, and waiting for bridges to arrive. We are also in the final throes of completing surcharge for Cherry Street itself. So we're surcharging the area in order to get compaction in the soil, the native soils, to compact the sands and the peats that are below, so that when we actually put the roads in, all the materials for the roads, there will be no further compaction. The roads will be stable. And here's the first bridge that will arrive in a couple of months. This is the Cherry Street LRT bridge. It is just on its way for painting, so it's fully constructed and welded together and ready for a paint job. Just note that the arches on top were actually created in the Netherlands through a shipbuilding process. There's nowhere in Canada that was able to actually provide these compound curves at this size and steel, so they were created there and shipped back to Halifax, where this has been assembled. And as George mentioned, tour was done with Minister McKenna a couple of weeks ago. Here's George, Julius, and the minister at the Keating Channel with the bridge abutments in behind. And I think that's everything. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks, David. You're doing an amazing job down there. How are we doing in terms of our budgeting?
We just have just finished off the 90% stage gate estimate, Steve, and we are still forecasting to be on time and on budget.
Okay, great news. Okay, well, thanks, David. Amazing job, as I've said. So George, I think I'd like to move on to the Quayside Timeline calendar.
Yeah.
So just remind everybody of that, and then we'll go into closed session.
That's great. And I'll go through this very quickly, Steve. But before I do that, I just wanted to acknowledge, as you did, Siobhan's great contribution. Sev, both Steve and I, and Steve's already acknowledged, you've been a great asset to the whole board. But in particular, I really appreciate the support when I came in that you gave us. So thank you. And just a Quayside timeline. As everybody knows, we've begun our initial phase of the community outreach and the market soundings. We will hold our first stakeholder advisory committee meeting in September. We also met with the assistant deputy ministers and the deputy city manager to keep them up to speed as we're required to, so that they're comfortable with the process we're undertaking. We have a board meeting on October 8th, and at that meeting, we will begin our, or at least prepare for the beginning of a full consultation with the public. We have a board meeting on December 10th where we'll approve the RFP. When the RFP is released, it should be released around late 2020, maybe early 2021. We would shortlist in early spring of 2021, and then we would target to select a successful proponent by the summer of 2021. So that's just a recap. We've presented this before, both to the governments and to yourself, but I did want everybody to recognize the timing. And we've been very busy, and so far, you know, the market soundings have been very productive, and the initial discussions with bilaterals with public groups have been very good, but we're looking to open up to a much more broader public consultation as we get further direction from the board. That'll be it, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So what I'd like to now do is move a motion to go into a closed session. And I just want to remind everybody that any resolution that's passed in closed session needs to be passed in open session as well. But is there a mover and seconder to move into the closed session?
Chris, I move it.
Great, thank you.
I'll second it.
Great, thanks, Patrick. I'll ask for a motion to terminate the meeting. Jenny?
Chris?
Great. Okay, so that's it. Again, really appreciate everybody's time this morning. It was extremely helpful, I think, and we'll look forward to our next steps.